Monsters coming down the hall, spires cover all the walls. Serial killer is on the line, wants to know if you have the time. Aliens are landing soon, this will mean certain doom. A chainsaw sputters and comes alive, blood and death are close behind. One thing you can be certain of, the zombies just can't get enough. Just one more bite is all they want. The ghosts downstairs are on the hunt. The Shade Chronicles are keeping score, that's what all the writing's for. They record their stories one by one so you don't miss all the fun.
Welcome to Season 3 of the Shade Chronicles, a podcast featuring short works of sci-fi and horror fiction. Here are your hosts.
Hi, this is Derek Lefford.
Hi, this is Lawrence Trokey, and thank you for spending your time with us. Let's get started with our first story.
The Shade Chronicles are keeping score, that's what all the writing's for. They record their stories one by one so you don't miss all the fun.
Look at Me by Jason Harris. The night his mother died, Cyril Sharp heard a knock, not a knock at the door upon the stroke of midnight, nor did a phosphorescent phantom or frightful fit of laughter follow the sound. What Cyril heard at precisely 3:12 a.m., he noted the glowing digits of the alarm clock, was an abrupt rap on the top of the worn pine wood dresser beside his bed. Before the knock, he had lain awake, wondering how much longer his long-suffering mother would continue in the limbo of hospice where she withered silently in her morphine haze. The previous day, she had fallen into unconsciousness, and she was not expected to reawaken. Cancer killed her slowly with begrudging territoriality. It ceded nothing. For years, the leukemia had advanced through her circulatory and lymphatic systems, but only in the last few months had Mrs. Sharp's symptoms demanded hospital care. Having refused radiation and chemotherapy, what a bother. Why make myself even more miserable only to die anyway? The so-called palliative care of hospice had claimed her in the twilight embrace of oxygen tubes, and IVS sepsis and pneumonia did the rest. The hospital records indicated Mrs. Agatha Sharp died at 3:10 a.m. After learning of the nearly simultaneous moment of death and mysterious knocking, Cyril wondered if his mother had reached out in a ghostly grasp across space and 2 minutes' time. If so, was the rapping a cry of pain or a reassuring farewell? Cyril had read of spiritualist rapping at Victorian seances, but all that seemed malarkey. He had also read of wraiths, apparitions of the newly dead or the still living but sorely stressed folks, as well as poltergeists, noisy ghosts that were emanations from the living that tapped on cabinets, spun fan blades, or upset a champagne glass. Because of his profession, counseling middle schoolers in Redding, California, Cyril had more than once considered that there really was something to the belief that an adolescent's nervous and often sexual energy might manifest in some form other than hair-twirling, gum-chewing, body-piercing, rock-through-window-throwing, or similar teenage fare. Was then the short, sharp knock upon his dresser a manifestation of Cyril's own anxieties? I realize it could have just been the dresser shifting from air pressure or the weight of clothes. Cyril explained everything to Pepper O'Leary, his life coach who had plied her trade first to wannabe actors in Los Angeles, then to New Age college professors in Santa Cruz, and finally to whomever she could connect with in Redding. They'd met during yoga. Don't overanalyze things. Pepper twirled one of her dreadlocks, chunky with beads and shells. Do an extra half hour of transcendental meditation each night. You'll get more grounded. You need to grieve flowingly. I've got girls at school who might carve up their arms into manga comics, and boys who might shoot up a teacher if I don't show up and listen. Take at least a couple weeks off. Flush your chakras, Cyril put in a leave of absence for bereavement to do the 2 weeks of chakra flushing. He also smoked up the last of his mother's medicinal marijuana and spent his free time looking up theories and testimonials about communicating with the dead. Electronic voice projection, EVP, proved intriguing, but the skeptical challenge that such records indicated only the power of static to be an audio Rorschach test were not easily dismissed. Video recordings of spooks appeared to be photoshopped. Ouija boards? Cyril had tried, merely alphabet soup. He attempted a spell or two he found online that was supposed to be from a 17th century grimoire and could help materialize a relative. As instructed, he burned a black candle, but nothing happened except he got frustrated with the tongue-twisting phrase of, "Come forth, thou fashioned, phantom of familiar shape. Come forth and let me fathom thine form." The black candle he'd purchased from Maggie's Magic and New Age supplies shop burned low along with his patience, fakery, and wishful thinking. He tried the transcendental meditation too, but chanting Om bored him, so he daydreamed about the dead in his own way. Did the dead dissolve into atomic particles that some cosmic, unknown attractor swept into a vacuum cleaner at the center of the universe? Did traces of departed minds insinuate themselves into the brains of the living? Intermingling dead thoughts with living desires? Or was all just dark emptiness? When a battery goes out, the machine stops. The mind was part of the brain machine. A television gets no picture when its tube has burned out. Philosophizing was a waste of time, just like religious delusions to keep from thinking. Cyril yet believed there must be more to be discovered of the human capacity for an afterlife. Nothing so trite as heaven or hell. Multi-dimensional physics could eventually help find the answers. But the speculation of scientists about interpenetrating universes offered little more substantial than the parlor tricks of spiritualists. Thus, Cyril dreamed of skulls and black holes as he smoked from his dolphin-shaped bong. After his last inhalation of pot became merely a scent in his living room, Cyril pondered the dark shadows at the corner of his room until they twitched and bloomed into billowing flowers of black tendrils. Surely just a bad vision from a dozen too many hits. Nevertheless, he jumped out and ran to the bedroom, shut the door, and kept his bathroom light on. He slept poorly. This new anxiety persisted. Inside the Mother Bud's medical cannabis dispensary, Cyril spotted his life coach, Pepper, also getting hefty packets of cannabis. She blushed deeply into her freckles when she saw Cyril in line behind her. Just a tad of depression. It doesn't make me less valuable to my clients. If anything, I'm able to understand their troubles more really. But hey, don't spread this around about me, okay? Cyril nodded. However, she continued to stand in front of him, waiting for something more. His annoyance increased as he pondered her frown lines. Some angry lurching in his brain made him want to even tear at her skin, reveal the bones beneath those furrowed brows. His fingers began to twitch. "Are you feeling better, Cyril?" "Sure. Doctor gave me a script. It's getting me mellower. I need it to sleep. Otherwise, I'm up all night on the internet, looking at porn?" Pepper laughed, then turned serious when Cyril didn't even smile. "I'm sorry. You can grieve however you need to." He uncurled his fingers, which Pepper looked at with strange amusement, as though he were holding a dildo and denying it. At least she'd stopped frowning. He could let go of those fantasies of wanting to tear her skin off. "I've actually been reading about ghosts and watching videos about people who have claimed to have had otherworldly experiences." "Ah, that's really cool. I know someone who leads seances. Some in her group also do Wicca, fun nature religion sky-clad dancing stuff. I think you're the one into porn. I know what sky-clad means, she shook her head. No, there's really nothing all that erotic about it. Just being free. And this seance wouldn't be like that. Seriously, join the group next Saturday. I'll tell them about your loss. His fingers began to twitch again. No, please don't. Will you come if I don't say anything about you except that you're interested? I'm not all that interested. Cyril had actually decided to attend the silly thing. The seance proved disappointing. Not that Cyril had arrived with great hopes. Aside from trying to ignore how Pepper kept giving him significant glances, as though he should be announcing his situation along the lines of, "I'm Cyril, and I might have a ghost tapping on my dresser." The mundane messages allegedly coming from the dead, imparted via Pam, the seance leader, bored him. Most of the attendees of the seance merely observed, nodding when Pam claimed to be seeing or hearing from some victim of heart attack or stroke. The whole business reminded Cyril of cold-reading scammers on reality television. One couple, who were so good-looking Cyril suspected them of being actors, looked deeply impressed by Pam's revelation that their miscarried baby smiled at them from the other world. Had they spoken to her privately before? Sure looked fishy. He found himself growing angrily suspicious, and his fingers had started their twitching yet again. At the end of the session, Pepper took Cyril by the wrist and led him up to Pam. Cyril explained his knocking on the dresser anecdote. It's not unusual for the newly deceased to reach out to loved ones, Pam said, stroking her moonstone pendant. This could have been her way. Have you felt anything else? Cyril wondered how much she'd spent on that pendant. No. Pam closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. Oh my, there's an energy with you. Something darker, not your mother, I'm sure. Sullen negativity. Any thoughts on that? I work with teenagers? Pepper laughed and tapped Pam's shoulder. Cyril is such a kidder, isn't he? Pam opened her eyes and shook her head. It's something more. There's really strange energy spiraling out of a vortex at your feet. My feet? Why would that be? I don't know, Pam said. Can you talk to it? No, I don't think it's human. Can you cleanse him? Pepper asked. I can try, but I'm not sure that I can. This seems like an elemental or another force of nature. I really don't know what it is. Would you like me to try, Cyril? Nah, I'll stick with whatever I've got. Something to explore, right? Sure, Pam said. You've probably lived with it for years. I bet you can handle it. Maybe it even gives you strength to deal with those delightful young people. But if you have any trouble, here's my card. Cyril took the card, wondered at Pam's nervous smile, read the text about Pam the medium, and resolved to later burn the card with the same black candle he'd used earlier to try to call the spirit of his mother to manifest. If you do want to see your mother, Pam said, you could just try asking her to show herself, to materialize. She might not be around to do it, but it's worth a shot. Sounds good. Cyril wished he could dematerialize and get the hell home again. On his way to the parking lot, a Hispanic man with a goatee tapped him on the elbow and said, "Those seances aren't all they're cracked up to be, huh?" Cyril vaguely recalled seeing him among the seance audience. Nope, but I wasn't expecting much. What about you? Nah, I know where there are real spirits. I just go to meet the hot new age chicks. Didn't see a lot of those tonight either, Cyril said. Huh, you're picky, huh, brother? I'm Miguel, by the way. Miguel extended his hand. So where are they? Cyril shook Miguel's hand. Hot new age chicks or spirits? Spirits. Ghosts. Where do they hang out? La Playa, man. Miguel told Cyril about La Playa Park down near Sacramento, where people went camping in the Delta area. He told about the abandoned farmhouse at the edge of La Playa Creek, an almost dried-up tributary. He told how in the farmhouse there was a bench where people over the years had sat and listened and waited and had gone crazy from fear. Some had moved away. Ma, what do people have to do to be able to see that crazy stuff? Go after dark. No special time of night except I hear Saturdays when a lot goes down. What goes down? If people ask to see a spirit will show up. I'm not going to get jumped if I go, am I? Hell no. Not with security patrols out there looking for drug dealers. It's as safe as a mall for grandmas. Folks who go camping don't even go near the farmhouse either. Reputation has gotten too bad. You might come across a stupid teenager from the Bay, but locals know better. You don't go? Hell no, I don't go. I've heard enough to know what I don't need to see. But seeing is believing, right? For you, man. That's why I'm telling you. But not for me. I just like new age ladies, so if I ask to see my mom, who I think has been knocking on my dresser, then that's the place to go, right? Sure, man, it sure is. But here's one thing for you to think about. Why the hell do you think your mom would be banging on your dresser? So it was decided. Cyril would go next Saturday. Laying awake that evening, Cyril listened in the silence of his two-bedroom apartment for any unusual sounds. Nothing. Go ahead and materialize, Mom. Pam said you might be able to do it. If you're around? He stared into the gray darkness, hunting for the shimmer of a materializing phantom. He saw nothing. Any spirits here? Care to materialize? Bam! Cyril froze. Something had hit the dresser. Bam, bam! Cyril's hand darted out from the covers and grabbed his smartphone, which lay on top of the dresser. His skin prickled, but he still saw nothing once his phone's touchscreen had illuminated the room in its bluish glow. Cyril leaped out of bed, flipped on the main light and bellowed, "Is that you, Mom? Or is that someone else? Tell me, show yourself, just go ahead and do it." There would be no seeing with this ghost, it seemed. Padding down the carpeted steps, Cyril went in the kitchen and microwaved himself a cup of valerian tea. Under the influence of the bright kitchen lights, crossword puzzles, and the scent of oranges in the big green bowl on the breakfast bar, Cyril reconsidered the poltergeist theory. Perhaps it was his nerves, psychic disposition, or a tad of something perky in his energy field. After all, living things conducted electricity that showed up as a dark vortex to the silly seance lady. Or she'd sensed his bad temper, his tendency lately to want to strangle people or tear their face off. That might be the sort of thing to darken up an aura, right? Despite his fright, overwhelming fatigue, perhaps from the valerian tea, set upon Cyril. He lay down and slept the rest of the night, dreaming at times of swimming in an underground lake whose dark waters shifted between a pudding-like texture and thin air. He feared getting crushed, falling to a greater depth, or suffocating in those dark waters. At some point in his dream, he forgot fear, and he slept in the fetal position, curled up like some shrimp or mollusk, withdrawn into the dark corner of its shell. When he awoke and recalled the thrill of last night's sounds, Cyril could barely wait to drive the 3-hour-long stretch of dull Sacramento Valley scenery and get to La Playa. The river delta had exposed cracked mud, creased in wavy lines, stinking dead-striped bass and tube-like Pacific lamprey corpses, twisted and dried out like abandoned rubber soles. California's drought and water pollution seemed to only get worse. What's more, that fool of a governor agreed to let even more water get diverted to Los Angeles, so, as usual, Northern California got screwed. There was still talk of gouging out the river delta area altogether by excavating a massive aqueduct by which rainwater would get funneled in a big straw for Los Angeles to gulp up. If that happened, La Playa Park would probably close since there would be no water left at all. After parking his Subaru Outback in the gravel lot, Cyril stalked through the tall grasses under the lengthening shadows of the setting March sun. It was too cold for anyone to be inclined to be out camping. The Sacramento area hardly ever got snow, but the March wind had a bite to it. The swing set was creaking with the weight of two little girls who were singing to each other while their mother pushed them. As Cyril approached, the girls stopped swinging and started dancing in a circle, holding each other's hands. When he neared them, Cyril saw their sparkling eyes and smiling, rouged-up faces. Their mom obviously overdid the "your daughter is your doll" approach to motherhood. Ashes, ashes, they all fall down. The little girls collapsed and giggled. Their mother flinched, took a step back, and grinned at Cyril as he walked by. He felt a chill down his neck when he nodded at her and saw the wide eyes and tight skin stretched in her sunburnt wrinkles. He somehow had terrified her. Maybe the expression on his face was grim, or because he was a single man walking through the park at sunset. Every man got judged a potential predator. Couldn't blame her for that. He tried to look peacefully at the sunset. He kept walking as the fiery ball of the sun descended behind the ruin of the legendary farmhouse ahead, touted as a spirit hangout by the mysteriously well-informed Miguel. Cyril, vigilant to avoid rusty nails or black widow spiders, stepped through the doorway and crunched over withered brown leaves. However, nothing stabbed up or wriggled on the floor of dusty stone. The cobwebs appeared empty. Surely there were some critters hiding in the nearby pyracantha bushes, or stand of willows and cottonwoods at the edge of La Playa Creek. Somewhere in the twilight, an owl hooted, and crickets began their night music. Sitting on the bench in the middle of the old farmhouse, Cyril enjoyed the quiet and looked out through the narrow square windows, out at the setting sun settling into the tangerine haze. Turning to glance behind him through the doorway, he saw the family had vanished. No doubt they'd planned to depart with sundown. Only Cyril, the hidden critters, and the spirits, if they existed, were left. A gray chill of valley fog mixed in the air, and the coldness blew in Cyril's face. "Well," Cyril said aloud, "I don't have all night, and I didn't bring much to eat and drink, so let's get on with things. Can I see my mom's ghost? Are you there, Mom?" No answers emerged from the wind or shadows in the farmhouse. Cyril took out a stick of beef jerky, bit off a section, chewed, and swallowed. He followed up with a swig from his small water bottle he had in the inner pocket of his flannel jacket. He stood up, stretched his legs and back, sat back down, humming. Then he heard a scampering sound in the leaves, a kind of drumming on the ground outside the wreck of a building. Perhaps a jackrabbit scurried by, fleeing the nearby owl. Cyril stared out the window opposite the doorway. He still saw nothing. The scampering sound continued, along with the drumming, and the whole outside of the farmhouse seemed to pulse with an echoing rhythm. Behind this rhythm came a chattering sound, and words, "Look at me! Look at me! Look at me!" Out of the corner of his eye, Cyril could see that something blocked the doorway. The words had a clicking, inhuman insistency, and they spun out like hurtling objects into the darkness, creating a Doppler effect of rising and falling abrasive echoes. "Look at me! Look at me! Look at me!" His fingers pulsed, and his nails dug into his palms, but Cyril dared not turn around. The sound mesmerized and terrorized Cyril. Gone was the notion that seeing was believing, or that this was any familiar spirit whose voice ricocheted out in the cold air amid dead leaves. He tried to get angry, to hate whatever tormented him, but he only felt fear. He would not look at it, this thing that loomed in the doorway and repeated its cry. Cyril stared instead at his cell phone. The screen had gone blank, and his trembling fingers impotently fumbled at the numbers. 911. "Look at me! Look at me! Look at me!" The words continued, and Cyril squeezed shut his eyes, buried his head in his arms, and pressed his elbows into his knees. Somehow, the night passed. Cyril awoke at dawn with shivers and an empty stomach. He went back to his car and drove straight to St. Mary's, the Catholic church that poked up its white steeple before the Delta Highway curved off to the northeast to join Interstate 5. Arriving before the services, no one was around to interfere with awkward questions or phony friendly fellowship. Cyril entered the confessional box, and in a few minutes he saw the black curtains ripple in front of him. He waited a minute, but since there was no invitation to speak, Cyril spoke first himself. "Father, I fear I have sinned and am now pursued by an unclean spirit." The words seemed so formal, so stiff, so ridiculous for Cyril to be saying, but he felt he needed to do what he could now that he had drawn to himself something terrible by his inquisitiveness. "Tell me more, my son." The flat voice held neither warmth nor surprise, but at least there was no condescending judgment either. Cyril explained his story to the listener on the other side of the dark drapes. "I don't know what to make of it all, Father. I've never really believed in ghosts, or spirits, or demons, or anything really. Yet you are here. Yes, I'm here. So what do I do?" There was a pause. The air seemed colder. Cyril figured he was developing a chill because of his night outdoors. "What do I do? I'm not Catholic. Do I still say Hail Marys to drive away spirits?" From the other side of the drapes came a low laugh, as though the father had phlegm. Then the voice spoke gravely, with an almost metallic echo. "There are no spirits, ghosts, or demons. But there are principalities beyond naming, powers beyond description, marvels beyond knowing. What do I do? What do I do?" A cold wind blew in Cyril's face. The black drapes did not stir. Cyril got on his knees in the confessional, his back to the black drapes where his confessor hid in dignified but reticent authority. "Please," Cyril cried out, "just tell me." "What do I do? I'll tell you what you do." Again came the low laugh, ending this time with clicks echoing through the empty church. There was no mistaking the voice which came now, the strange Doppler effect of its tones. Cyril shook with fear and clenched his hands in horror, and now the black drapes slowly parted, and something leaned forward, nearly touching the nape of his neck. "Turn around, you little sad fool, and look at me." Cords in Cyril's neck twisted, but his brain screamed through nerves that he must not turn. He turned and looked. He saw something with wrinkled eyes that pulled with the weight of 1,000,000,000 suns, dragged Cyril into darkness of knowing and fear that neither light nor life could escape. He would have torn his own eyes out and cheeks to the bone, but already the intermingling of space with what was before him ripped each cell of flesh, separated each atom of soul. The seeing was already complete. Darkness whole, not empty at all. These are not merely words. This story is an incantation, a penetration between worlds of which you cannot yet fathom. What you had barely glimpsed when they'd stuck you in that closet as a child, buried in mounds of endless dark. Until now. Because now, you're not alone. You never actually were. I'm at your back. You know this to be true. Feel the chill? Feel the prying of the psychic lever by which I peel back your soul and brain? Now turn around, barren and despairing fool, and look at me.
For 2 seasons, the Shade Chronicles podcast has introduced you to a universe of the scary, strange, weird, and fascinating. Now all of the stories from the first 2 seasons of the podcast are collected and available in a hardback book for your reading enjoyment. Newly edited and revised, experience the fright and wonder again of the stories from the Shade Chronicles, and join us on an exploration of imagination. Find your copy of Tales from the Shade Chronicles podcast on Amazon today, also available in paperback and Kindle versions.
Attention Shade Chronicle podcast listeners. The merchandise store is now open. You can find the merchandise store on the merchandise tab on the Shade Chronicles website, which is at theshadechronicles.com. Find premium t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, travel mugs, ball caps, and more at the Shade Chronicles podcast merchandise store. We now resume your regular programming.
The Legend of Urmah the Sumerian by Lawrence Trokey, Part 1. Behold and prepare thyself for a tale of swords, sorcery, and blood, long after the waters from the great flood of Enlil drained into the oceans and the hero King Gilgamesh was at last laid to rest in his tomb. A warrior did arise, sent by the gods to put fear back in the hearts of men and desire in the hearts of women. A battle-scarred helmet sat on his protruding brow and shaded the eyes that had seen countless men take their last breath on the end of his blade. Brilliant armor covered his chest that had tasted the blood of many warriors. Thick, corded arms hung from his sides, swollen from the work of war. Around his waist hung a sword like no other, some say forged by the fires of hell itself, and sharper than any dragon's bite. Verily, I say unto thee, this champion had no match in Mesopotamia, and few who would even dare challenge him, let alone stand in his path. Most men feared to speak his name, and looked away if they should have come upon him. Women let their gaze linger on his frame, long and dreamt of a chance to catch his eye. History knew him as Urmah the Sumerian. The bard was interrupted by a loud belch coming from the figure slumped at the table, mostly drunk to the point of blacking out. This proved to be the audience of the minstrel, and he was quite taken back by the outburst. Not sure if it was a comment on his work or merely a biological response to the consumption of so much beer. The drunken man started to say while raising his hand.
The part about the women gazing upon him. Tell me more about that,
he said, and slumped back in his chair, grinning. The troubadour looked at his freshly inscribed clay tablet. Well, it is still a work in progress, but I can expand on that part if it is to your liking. He lowered the tablet and held it with both hands, almost like he was praying or begging to be done with the drunkard and go home.
Aye,
the drunk replied.
Here.
He reached into a sack next to him and pulled from it a small purse. He threw it on the table towards the bard, and its contents spilled onto the surface. There were several jewels and a couple of gold coins that rolled out of the purse.
This should cover your wages so far, and for any additions that I might require you to make.
You're very generous, my liege. The bard quickly scooped up the precious stones, and tucked them in a pouch and shoved that in his robes.
It is important that my legend be well written and thus proclaimed across the land.
A burp interrupted the grand gesture he made with his arm as he spoke of his legend. Allow me this evening to draft a new tablet with the changes you require, the bard asked, hoping this would grant him his leave of this drunkard.
Aye, good bard, be on thy way,
the drunk said, waving his hand dismissively. Once the bard was gone, the drunk drank from a freshly poured cup of beer. After draining the cup, his massive arm and hand holding the cup sank to the table along with his head. It came to rest face down in his dinner plate, which had been mostly cleared. The drunk was awakened by someone who had pulled his head up from where it rested on the plate by his hair. His thick beard still draped over the plate and had now contained bits of the food he was dining on the night before. He could barely open his eyes and his mouth fell agape. A soft moan escaped from somewhere deep inside him.
Is this the mighty warrior, then?
The person holding up his head said. He was dressed in fine robes, brightly colored and adorned with thick gold bracelets and chains. He wore a modest headdress, which was an indication to all who met him that he was an official in the local government, perhaps even royalty. Another individual next to the official, who wore the garb of a soldier, responded, "Yes, my lord. The troubadour we arrested last night told us that we would find him here."
Very well.
The official released his hold on the drunk's head, and it fell back into the plate.
Bring him to the temple along with the bard. Bathe him, though, so he doesn't desecrate the sacred house of Nurgle.
He exited the hut and left the soldier to manage the drunk's removal. Another soldier entered after him with a large clay pot filled with water. He threw it on the drunk with little ceremony. The drunk was awakened by the sudden shock of the cold water. His arms flew back and his head flung upwards, throwing streams of water as it flew. The man stumbled backwards off his stool and fought to stay on his feet. One of his hands found the wall behind him, and it steadied him. His eyes shot to the soldier still holding the clay pot. Anger flashed behind his eyes, and in one swift movement, the drunk threw the table that had been his bed to the side one-handed, like it was made of straw and not thick slabs of wood. Before the soldier holding the pot could react, the drunk was upon him and sent a beefy fist that broke through the pot, sending shards everywhere. His fist landed squarely on the soldier's jaw, throwing him reeling backwards and crashing through the doorway to the hut. The other soldier was faster in his reaction to the attack and drew his short sword and swung it at the man, only to have it stopped with a loud clang that came from the man's own sword, which was close to cleaving the soldier's head in two. The drunk moved with amazing speed for someone in his condition. The soldier raised his other hand and yelled, "Hold! We did not come here to quarrel with thee."
"And yet your manners are quite lacking and deserving of a rebuke,"
the man shouted back. The other soldier stumbled into the hut, holding his sword limply in one hand and his broken jaw with the other. Blood leaked from the corners of his mouth. The first soldier tried again and lowered his sword while still holding up his other hand. "We are soldiers for the magistrate and high priest, for the temple of Nurgle. We escorted His Highness here to find you and ask for your aid. He instructed us to wake you and bring you with us. You need to be ceremonially cleaned to enter the temple. We were only trying."
"What aid does the magistrate and high priest require that his pitiful god won't grant?"
The man did not relax his defensive stance, and his blade danced back and forth between the soldiers, eager to strike them down. That is for you and the magistrate to discuss. You are Urmah the Sumerian, yes?
Yes, you stand in the presence of the legendary warrior.
The man spat back at him. The soldiers share a look briefly at his bold claim. Very well. Would you come with us then? The soldier asked in a softer tone.
Aye, for now. Be grateful to your gods that you had no other intentions for meeting me.
Urmah walked out the door of the hut into the sunlight, which slammed into him like a blunted battle axe. He tried not to reveal he was wincing in pain from the morning light, or that he was suffering a massive hangover now raging through his head. A two-person chariot was waiting for them outside the hut. The soldier gestured for Urmah to step up into the chariot, and he instructed the injured soldier to ride his horse back while he would drive the chariot. The ride was bumpy and noisy as the chariot bounced and navigated its way through the dirt-covered streets of the city of Isen. It was here that many of the field workers and tradesmen lived, who provided the king with crops and weapons for his army. Much dust was kicked up in their wake. As they approached the center of the city, where the palace and temples were located, the streets were more refined, having been paved, and were much wider than the narrow streets of the poorer residents. Unfortunately, all the bouncing and intense sunlight were too much for Urmah. He leaned over the side of the chariot and emptied the contents of his stomach on the brick road. Once he recovered, he stood up and tried to look like the mighty warrior he claimed to be. Chest sticking out, bearded chin lifted and protruding. The chariot turned towards the walls surrounding the temple of Nergal, a modest-sized ziggurat on the edge of the royal areas of the city. The soldier steered the chariot towards a gated entrance and sped through past more soldiers standing guard. He brought the chariot to a stop in a courtyard at the foot of the stone stairs that led to the upper parts of the temple. A multi-tiered fountain twinkled and dribbled water down to collect in a pool nearby. Urmah stumbled off the chariot, and before anyone could stop him, he was at the pool, taking large handfuls of water and splashing his face with it. Two soldiers nearby ran to him, and one said urgently, "You must not defile the waters of the fountain. It is sacred. If the high priest sees you..." Urmah cut him off.
Fear not, I am finished. Now where is this high priest?
The soldier pointed to the top of the stone stairs. Urmah strode to the stairs and climbed them with the intent on getting to the bottom of what aid the high priest needed from him. At the top of the stairs, an official-looking person in colorful robes and jewelry met him and escorted him to a structure. A box-like building that housed the area where the priests prepared themselves to ascend to the top level, where they prayed and made offerings to Nergal, the god of war, destruction, and the underworld. Urmah started to enter the structure, but a priest stepped in his way, with his hands up in front of him. "You cannot enter here, so only sanctified priests may enter the temple."
The high priest summoned me.
Urmah responded, starting to lose patience with all of this. "Yea, he will speak to you from the entrance. Please wait a moment." The priest disappeared into the shadows of the room. Urmah leaned against the outside wall and wiped his brow. He still felt the effects of his hangover and only wanted to lie down in a cool bed with some wine to ease his suffering. A moment later, the high priest emerged in the doorway silently, with the first priest behind him. Urmah didn't notice at first, but when he did, he nearly jumped at the sight of him. The high priest had been adorned for his daily service to the temple of Nergal. He wore a brightly polished chest plate with jewels embedded in its surface. On his head, a high headdress, also fixed with jewels. His outer robes were much more decorative than before and flowed around him. He carried a ceremonial staff made of gold and decorated with jewels and precious stones. The high priest emerged from the structure and strode out on the platform towards the steps. From its vantage point, he could see a good portion of the city to the west and south.
Are you familiar with the city of Kish, Sumerian?
The high priest asked, not looking at him. Urmah stepped away from the wall and approached the high priest from behind.
I have traveled there before. It has been a few years, but...
Good.
The high priest cut him off.
There is a woman who is there in the city. Her name is Nanaya. She is a member of the royal family. She was betrothed to our king, but she has refused to honor her family's promise. We will need you to go to Kish and retrieve her. You will be given an army to lead to accomplish this task.
He removed a gold wristband from his left arm and handed it to the Sumerian.
Take this and show it to the commander at the gate. He will recognize my symbol and know that I sent you. He will gather your troops and provision you for this mission.
And what sort of compensation should I expect for doing this for you?
Urmah asked. Seeming somewhat annoyed at this, the high priest said,
You will be well paid for your services.
Urmah didn't move, but just kept staring at the priest. Finally, the high priest offered
10 talents, enough to keep you wealthy for the rest of your life.
And wouldn't it be customary that I be given a deposit to secure my services?
Urmah offered and held out his hand. The servant to the high priest looked mortified at the suggestion and said indignantly, Surely the high priest's word is more than enough to secure the likes of you. Urmah frowned at the man, but then the high priest put his hand on the shoulder of the servant and said,
It is only fair that a warrior of his stature be paid a retainer as a good faith gesture.
Urmah stood slightly more erect after the perceived compliment from the high priest. The servant just groaned quietly and rolled his eyes. The high priest looked back to the box-like structure and snapped his fingers. Another servant emerged with a large sack. He carried it with both hands and struggled with the weight of it, but finally managed to drop it at the feet of Urmah.
A talent's worth of gold in advance should be sufficient, don't you think?
The high priest asked.
Aye,
Urmah agreed. He picked it up one-handed and swung it over his shoulder effortlessly. He gave a sly grin to the servant who protested and started towards the stairs.
I will bring victory to you and your king soon, so best to get the rest of my reward ready. Of course, I will reimburse you for the cost of a cart and mule, so feel free to deduct that from my wages and load the balance and have it waiting for me. I will not be long.
He disappeared down the stairs. The servant priest quickly turned to the high priest, and in a frantic state, he exclaimed, My lord, surely we must stop him. He is not to be trusted. He will not return. He will just run off and ignore the mission since he already has his belly full of your gold.
My dear Ekar, you worry too much. The fool is so full of himself that he is honor-bound to do as I bid. It is a small price to pay to see my plan launched. Once this idiot has driven the king's army to the agreed-on place, Kish's king, Zukakip, will ambush it and kill it. Then our king will be powerless to stop me as I usurp power and become the new king of Isin.
continued next time on the Shade Chronicles.
All right, we have just completed episode 10, and in this episode, we got to feature stories by Jason Harris, which is Look at Me, the first story in this episode. And Jason, just give you a little insight on who Jason is, he teaches creative writing at Texas A&M University, which, that's impressive.
It is, yeah.
And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, a lot of the submissions that we get, a lot of these folks are very educated and doing, those kind of things, being in the academic world.
Definitely.
And so Jason is one of those. And in addition to his fine career at Texas A&M, he also has written for several literary magazines and journals. One of them that kind of jumps out in his list of credits here is the Saturday Evening Post.
Yeah, really.
I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah, it is.
That's big time there. So, Jason, thank you for submitting your story to us. Look at Me, and we're going to talk about it now. So, Derek, I'll throw it to you. What kind of thoughts you have about Jason's story?
Look at Me was very, very good written. The story is appealing and to my ghost hunting side, the things I like to watch and view. It had all the events or all the elements of a good ghost story, and
I think so,
it was very well tense when it needed to be tense, and the audio was great with it. I agree.
You know what I liked too, though, even though it is a great ghost story, is that Jason brings his character Cyril into this world with a high dose of cynicism.
Yes, definitely.
This guy doesn't think any of this shit's legit.
Right.
But he still has enough curiosity, and maybe because of his experience with his mother dying and the thing that happened,
right,
he still wants to investigate.
Yeah, that's what I thought was interesting about it too. And the whole idea of someone being followed by something that's not of this world is obviously horrifying to me.
Yeah.
To think that would be happening.
Sure.
And the ending was a really good button at the end of it to just kind of give you the chills.
Yeah, he changes from telling you a story, and now all of a sudden you're in the story.
Right.
And you are the one on the hook for whatever this entity is that Cyril was dealing with. He's the one, you're the one now who has to confront it.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a very nice twist, I thought.
Yeah, it was good. Very good. Very good.
I appreciated, again, like I said, the cynicism of the character, his sarcasm over, some of the ridiculous things that people in this world who claim to be spiritual and maybe not in the traditional sense. That's certainly where he wasn't. I mean, he wasn't necessarily in a religious sort of thing. Although at the end,
and near the end, though,
he does resort to that. But in the beginning, it's all these alternate types of explanations and philosophies about the afterlife and spiritual world and that kind of thing. And he's just not having it. He's just not buying any of this
Especially
shit.
the conversation between him and the other person when I went to see the psychic or whatever it was.
Yeah, the guy's just into the chicks. Yeah, he's just into the chicks that like this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
which I could totally relate to. Not that I'm into that kind of thing, or would seek out women like that.
Situations like that,
but we know people
reason.
like that.
Yeah,
we have good friends that when we grew up as young men who would be like, I'll go ahead and pretend I'm a punk rocker just so I can hang out with this punk rock chick, or I can pretend that I'm a rapper just to hang out with this rap chick, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and this is no different. This is a person, or this is a guy who sees opportunities in meeting women by going to these places, and he feels that he's got a shot, maybe instead of just going to a bar.
Right. Yeah.
So, but he's still, I guess, he's bumped up against enough of the spiritualism to recognize something that is real that he wants to stay away from.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, I don't want to mess with that.
Yeah.
I just want the chicks.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for answers, Cyril, you go to this place,
Right.
La Palma, and you hang out here, and something's going to happen, and you can explore whatever it is you want to explore there. I thought that was kind of interesting too.
It was a good balance between the being cynical and then actually believing and being fear.
Right.
Stuff
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And so, the other thing that I think is interesting is that this starts with the death of his mother, and what I'm not 100% certain of, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, is that the entity that we're confronted with at the end of the story, or is it something else? Has Cyril opened the door to allow something else to come in, more sinister, obviously, because of the way that the thing ends, and that is the gateway, his interest in trying to understand what happened to his mother as she passed, is that the gateway into allowing something else more sinister into his life? Some folks, especially in the religious communities, traditional religious communities, would say that, if you mess with Ouija boards or if you go to seances, you are inviting demons to
you don't know what's
come
coming
and
through.
possess you.
And, whenever you go to a psychic and they say your relative is speaking to you through them, that's actually a demon. It's not, that.
Right.
So I think that I'm going to go with my opinion. Didn't think about that part, but my opinion is that it is something that's not his mother.
Yeah. I can't see his mother. Who knows what kind of relationship they had. He doesn't really go into the background there, or if it was a positive one, or if it was just one that he felt he had to be there at her end to satisfy something for being her son, that kind of thing. So we don't know if it was a positive relationship or just an obligation for him to just be there as she passes. So, but the thing that he ends up encountering at the end is certainly negative. It's certainly, maybe not, you could say demonic, but maybe it's, has nothing to do with that. It's just something not good.
I know it's pissed off.
It is certainly pissed off. So in that sense, we have to wonder, could that really have been someone that he knew that was part of his family, or was it something else? So that kind of leaves the door open for some speculation there. But
agreed.
Yeah, no, great story. Thank you very much, Jason, for that. And the next story is one that I wrote, one of the few I have written this season. And, apologies to the audience if you like anything that I've written for the first 2 seasons and now you don't get as much the 3rd season. It's mostly just because I've been crazy busy with work. But I still love to do it, still love to write. So for those of you who are fans, yay, here comes a story from Lawrence. And for the rest of you, sorry, here comes another story from Lawrence.
And shockingly, it is not just one part.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And I didn't realize that till I got done, and I was like, oh, this is only part 1, damn it. Anyway.
There's going to be 3 parts at least.
Oh, don't ruin it.
I can't shut up. It's my problem. I feel I have to explain everything.
Okay, well, as you know, I did not believe you wrote it whenever we had a conversation, even though your name is mentioned in the damn thing.
Yeah.
I did not even realize it until, because I started hearing it and the sound of it and the voice that was reading it was just fantastic. And that's if that's not the best audio stuff you've done, we've had for the podcast, I don't know what is, but maybe there are the ones that are good. It's getting better and better. But anyway, enough of that kissing your butt on that way. How did the story come to life?
Okay, so I mentioned this to you a week ago or so. This idea for this character came up maybe like over a year ago. And if you look at the actual document that has the text of the story, I had started with a description of an idea, which is how I usually start my stories. I'll, as I'm sitting there and an idea comes to me, I'll open up a document and I'll write out the idea, just kind of a rough outline, okay? And then when I'm ready to write the story, I'll open up that same document, reread my notes, and then start the story, okay? And the funny I mean, it's hilarious. The hilarious thing about this is the notes have nothing to do with what the story ended up being. Okay? In the notes, this was going to be something where Urmah is a con man of sorts, and he's conning people into hiring him to do things for them, as a mighty warrior. And he's really just finding ways to get money and get out, steal their money and take off. And as the notes progress, they say that Urmah does this to some civilization in the time that Urmah lives. And then as he's in the middle of this con, aliens arrive.
This is different than that.
It is completely different. Aliens arrive, and they want Urmah, kind of in that Galaxy Quest sort of way, where they're looking for heroes to save their world because they're not warriors, right? And they have seen, something or witnessed something that made them think that Urmah was it. Like his con worked not only on Earth, but for these aliens. So anyway, that's kind of where the notes were.
Yeah.
And as I started writing it, it just started flowing more as a historic piece. So spoiler alert, there won't be any aliens in this story. It won't conclude with that. But still, I wanted it to be a parody of Conan the Barbarian and other sword and sorcery stories like that. And there are examples of that. One of the ones that I'm trying to remember right now, the comic strip guy, Hagar.
Oh, Hagar.
You remember
Horrible.
Hagar?
Yeah.
Hagar the Horrible? I mean, so he's not a quote-unquote barbarian. Well, I mean, he kind of is. He's a Viking, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about Hagar and his misadventures. But again, just a parody of Conan the Barbarian. And that's kind of what I wanted Urmah to be, is this overblown version of Conan who stumbles his way through these adventures and somehow ends up on top.
Yeah, I like that it was this brutally arrogant character that is living in the world that leaves nothing to my imagination. It's just all is there, and I can see it with my mind's eye.
Wow.
Where he's at, what he's doing,
Sure.
The things that they're going through, at the bar, drinking, stuff like that. So it's a great layout of the story, and it really gives me something to. Well, now it's my favorite TV show, so you got to keep writing it, and obviously we're going to get 2 more. Yay! So, so I'm interested in where this goes from here because it was a pretty interesting cliffhanger.
Yeah. So, the title, Urmah the Sumerian, Conan the Barbarian. There's some resemblance there, and then the beginning of the story. I remember the first movie, Conan the Barbarian, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it starts in the same way,
right?
With the chronicler of Conan's story, the little Asian guy. I don't remember what exactly he was. He was like some kind of mystic, if you remember the movie at all.
Yeah.
He's a little guy, and he talks about the story of Conan and how he ends up being this great king, as the image shows. And then he says, and it still gives me chills to this day when I think of it, and I love this movie for it. He goes, "And let me tell you of the days of high adventure." And then it starts, boom, dum, dum, and into the grand music and all of the stuff happening and these giant horns and all this thing. And that's kind of what I wanted to start with, but then again, it's a parody, so we, kind of stomp on the brakes when the person who's narrating this to you is stopped by this large burp.
Yeah, exactly.
From Urmah, who's drunk off his ass.
Yeah.
And is trying to get somebody to create this legend for him so he can, justify or puff up his ego.
Yeah.
So yeah, part 1 kind of sets the stage for who this guy is and what's going on, and he's kind of a screw up. And then part 2, which is coming very soon, will put him in a predicament that was not intended or was not anticipated.
Yeah.
And then, of course, part 3 will be our conclusion. And give you a little sneak peek here. I'm kind of setting Urmah and the Bard, which is Rafik. You learn his name is Rafik in the second one.
Yes.
Kind of setting those guys up to be available for future stories.
Okay.
So.
Well, I do like the character and really can't hate this character at all, even though he gives you all the reasons to do it.
Sure.
In a sense, it's just it's going really well, and I'm ready for part 2.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And we'll go ahead and pull the plug on this episode in the commentary. But not before we go, we're going to give you a sneak peek of the next episode, which is right now. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Next time on The Shade Chronicles.
As Urmah left the gate, he saw some soldiers walking with the bard he hired last night. The bard was in chains and looked quite distressed. Urmah caught up to them and held out his hand to stop them.
Hold! This man belongs to me. Release him into my custody.
The soldiers looked at each other for a second, and then they drew their swords. Who the hell are you to give us orders? This one is headed for the dungeon, and then to work as slave labor in the fields. Now back away, or I will cut you through. Urmah held up the bracelet now adorning his left arm.
You recognize this, don't you, you Shabara?
The second soldier held up his left hand and laid it on the sword arm of his cohort. That is the symbol of the high priest of the Temple of Nergal. This one is operating under his authority. Lower your weapon. He gently pushed his arm down till the sword pointed at the ground. The morning found Urmah packing his horse while the bard was slow to rise. He apparently had too much wine the night before and was feeling the effects of his indulgence. Urmah entered the hut they slept in with a plate of food for the bard and told him they needed to leave soon. Once fed and packed, the pair rode back to the army encampment to find it ready to march. Urmah and the bard rode at the front of the column of troops as they took the path north towards Kish. By noon, Urmah noticed smoke rising from the hills ahead. The bard was dumbstruck to explain the phenomenon. Urmah spurred his horse to run towards the destruction. Once he crested the top of the hill, the mystery revealed itself to Urmah's distress.
On this seemingly regular day of the week, an interview begins that will have a very irregular ending. A member of the Shady Bluffs book club, Janice May, is in interview room 1 of the Shady Bluffs police station, and a figure not of this world is on a bench, shackled to the wall in interview room 2. At this time, this figure has 4 very heavily armed SWAT officers outside the room. 2 on each side of the door, and 2 across the hall, staring at the door, but no one is inside the room. This is a vast contrast to the room where Janice is, because there is no one outside the room, but inside there are 7 individuals, 4 of whom are police personnel. On the table in front of Janice are 3 audio recording devices, 2 video cameras, and multiple devices with speakerphones open to hear the interview.
Thanks again for listening to The Shade Chronicles. For comments or inquiries, you can contact us at shadechron@gmail.com. That's SHADECHRON@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also get more information at theshadechronicles.com. The Shade Chronicles podcast is the creative property of Derek Leffridge and Lawrence Trokey. Any attempt to replay for broadcast or distribution portions of any episode of The Shade Chronicles without the prior written consent from the creators and/or significant compensation is strictly prohibited. Shame on you for even thinking about it in the first place. Thanks again for listening,
Tune in next time for another episode of the Shade Chronicles.